All right. So I guess for people who didn't come to the first set of lectures or have, didn't take notes or whatever, um, this will be the first lecture on our series in programming in Python. Uh, but before we sort of start programming, I want to give you a rundown of, for one, how to get our programming tools installed on a sort of blank copy of Windows, but also some advice and pointers on using Windows and maybe optimizing, changing some settings that might matter for people. By default, Windows comes with a lot of predefined choices that are designed to help the not very familiar computer user have a stable and easy environment to work in. And a lot of times those choices result in a really frustrating experience for somebody who wants to do more power user work or development on their machines, which is what we'll be doing. So what you see here right now is a copy of Windows 11 running on a virtual machine that is essentially it's untouched. It's like you bought a laptop from the store and opened it up, and this is the first time you've opened it. All of the settings are sort of default, and so I can show you what I would do when I set up my computers for how I like to use them. If you're running a copy of Windows 10 or something, like some people like to, you'll have a lot of the same settings available to you, but they might be hidden in slightly different menus, or maybe under slightly different names. But you should be able to get the same sort of configuration going on Windows 10. Personally, I find Windows 11's way of organizing things to be more intuitive, and I think that it's a more stable operating system than Windows 10 is, for a lot of reasons. The main reason is that if you're a developer and you're making software right now, you're probably going to be building it for the most current edition of your operating system, so Windows 11. And any changes and optimizations, stability patches, you're going to focus on releasing for Windows 11. And then maybe as an afterthought, you'll go and push them back to Windows 10, make sure they're working. And because of that, all the software that's on the market is, at least currently developed software, is going to be more stable on Windows 11 in general than Windows 10. So even if Windows 10 at one point had a better set of stability, that time is essentially past. So I would recommend, if you are using Windows 10, updating to Windows 11. But if nothing we do in terms of programming, nothing we do will require a Windows 11 machine. So when I first get my computer, usually first thing I do is I go into the settings, obviously, and you will see, your general settings. First thing I would do when I open a computer is I check for updates. You'll see that I have something available here. But you want to come here and hit this button, because this will tell the computer to pull the Windows Update servers and get you most recent versions of stuff. I also like to have the most recent updates. So usually I check this box. This essentially just when your Windows computer checks the update server for updates, um, your that check is accompanied with a sort of identifier of whether your computer wants the current updates, whether it wants pre-release updates, whether it wants older stable updates, and even there's sort of a little bit of subsets in there. In the pre-release, there are a bunch of different pre-release groups for different amounts of stability. But in the sort of stable update zone, which is what you are by default, they push uh, they push the updates out to computers that are sort of higher priority or lower priority in order to keep the load on the Windows Update servers low. So if you hit this button, you're essentially put in the higher priority for the stable updates. And that's generally where I like to be. If you wanted to take pre-releases, you could go into the Windows Insider program. Would not recommend that. They are often pretty unstable. But after that, I go into advanced, and I usually add receive updates for other Microsoft products, which will do things like keep Office and similar Microsoft products up to date for you. And then I usually update over metered connections. This is a questionable choice if you're doing something like running over your cell phone Wi-Fi. This will pull a lot of data, so this is up to you. Again, I mean, all of it's up to you, but this allows you to get all the updates sort of as soon as they're available. If you did a clean install of Windows, you might want to do these optional updates. They're usually like drivers, but sometimes these can cause issues on your machine if you do them. So use these with caution. But that's for Windows updates. I usually do that. And then you check it for updates, and you'll get updates. I'm not going to do that now because it will probably result in wanting to restart my computer, and I'm teaching class, so I can't do that. But so that's the Windows update. For other people who maybe if you are doing gaming or something on your computer, you might care about the fact that Windows 11 is by default using a lot of your system resources up, and I can give you some quick pointers on how to correct that. So I hate light mode on computers, so I'm going to change it to dark mode because I find that much nicer to look at. But beyond that, here's some pointers for sort of optimizing Windows. It does take an amount of resource to change the background on the computer, so I usually like to put this as either a static picture or a solid color. I'm going to do solid color because it makes teaching the class a little bit easier in the long run, but this will use sort of the least amount of memory and things to be cycling media around. From there, by default, Windows 11 has Windows transparency. So all of the windows are slightly see-through, and they take background colors and things into account, and that takes a surprising amount of processing power to sort of compute what is behind your window and how to make it blurry and all that stuff. So you can turn that off by turning off transparency effects, and that will free up some additional stuff for you. So I usually do those two things. Dynamic lighting, it depends on your computer. It will it takes into account like the front camera and sort of changes some brightness and things like that. If you're using a desktop, you can always turn that off, and because you're not using it. Next one would be the lock screen, which for people who have not used Windows 11 before, one of the big complaints is that you get a lot of ads and weird stuff pushed to you that are internet connected resource. One of those is the lock screen. When you log in, you'll see stocks and news and things like that. The way you get rid of that is for one, we turn off the lock screen status, so that won't display that. But a secret tip here that not many people know is you will still get a bunch of these, what's going on in the photo for the lock screen. And the way you get rid of that, it's a little bit hidden, is you have to turn off Windows Spotlight. So if you set it to a picture, then you get access to this checkbox here that says get fun facts, and then you can turn that off. You cannot get rid of those fun facts unless you go to picture versus Spotlight. If you have Spotlight on, it will have that internet connectivity on your lock screen, and you can't get rid of it. So that's where that's hidden. The other sort of places that I would mess with are, I don't like having recommendations in my start menu. I like it to be just things that I want it to be. So I change that to more pins, and I turn off all of these options, which include showing weird promo ads and things in your start menu, and stuff like that. So I just turn off all of those. And then my start menu is already way more clean. And the other big complaint you see about Windows, or hear about Windows 11, if you are from people who are more used to older operating systems, is, oh, I don't like the centered start bar and things look different and what's all this stuff down here. So if you go into taskbar here, I like to turn off everything. And then you can go into taskbar behaviors, and if you wanted it to look like old Windows, you can put it on the left. Now you have a left-aligned start menu that doesn't have a bunch of the ads or weird extra boxes, and no weird ads in the start menu anymore. So this is often how I configure Windows machines. So that would be that. That's all sort of the basic configuration. As far as a little bit more advice outside of the personalization menu for getting rid of some of the web integrated features of Windows, you can go into this privacy and security menu, go into general, and you can turn off all of these, which are also all related to ad promotions and things in the Windows operating system. You can turn off your inking and typing personalization, which will, because it takes an amount of power to process all the things you're typing. You can turn off your diagnostics. I already have mine all off because I just set it up that way, but you can go down here and turn them all off manually if they're on for you. You can turn off activity history, which keeps track of like a bunch of things that you open and close. And then you can go to your search permissions, and I like to turn it off because I don't like having filters on anything. I'd rather just see what's there. And then you can make it so your computer no longer searches your Microsoft accounts and things like that. Turning all of these off will dramatically increase the rate at which you can sort of search in your start bar, which is good. All things that I like. Last one down in here is the searching Windows. Your computer does something called indexing with your files, which is sort of like it keeps little, it sort of tracks names and little bits of information about your files, and stores them in a little database so that when you do a search in your start menu, you can get results about files on your computer. And by just storing the names and little tidbits of information, it can find those rather fast without having to load all of the files into memory. And by default, it only does that with a few folders, right? Documents, pictures, and music. I like to do enhanced, which essentially toggling this makes it so that your computer will store that, little meta information about a lot more folders on your computer. So when you type something in the search bar, it will search essentially more like your whole computer rather than just a few places. So that's everything with regards to ad privacy. The other configuration setting I usually like to turn on, or rather off in this case, is device encryption. Windows device encryption is often turned on by default now. It's actually, I'm pretty sure on a Windows install, it is turned on by default. And what this does is it obviously encrypts your storage drive, and when because everything is encrypted, when you want to access something, it has to be decrypted. It adds a lot of sort of overhead to any task you do on the computer. And while encryption does seem like a good thing, it has kind of been shown, I think, in a few different different tests that the Windows device encryption does not do a very good job. It's rather easy to crack. So like you're getting very little benefit from something that actually costs you a lot to have implemented. So I usually turn this off because it doesn't really provide very much. So all in all, you might, if you did that, you probably changed you could have changed some settings on your computer that for anybody who's complained that Windows 11 runs slow or whatever, that will free up a lot of sort of system resource and make you able to run Windows 11 much better on even older machines. The other thing I usually do on a fresh install is I will come over to the installed apps, and Microsoft does install, a lot of people call it bloat. Some of it is bloatware. Bloatware is essentially a software tool that comes pre-installed on a computer that you don't need or want. And there's an amount of bloat on Microsoft or on Windows 11. The nice thing about Windows is that they allow you to uninstall pretty much all of it now. So I'm going to go down this list and show you everything that you can sort of uninstall to free up that space or that resource, because some of them run automatically too. So Copilot, Feedback Hub, Media Player, Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is their new branding for Office, Microsoft Clipchamp, which is a video editing tool, OneDrive. And to be clear for anybody who might be worried, when you uninstall OneDrive, it doesn't delete your files. You can still go access all of those files through a web browser and download them. The only thing this does is it handles the sort of desktop sync that my OneDrive can do, where your files that are on OneDrive will show up on your desktop like they're files. That's all that handles. Your files and everything are still there no matter how many times you uninstall OneDrive. Microsoft Teams, Microsoft To Do, News, which is Microsoft's news service, Outlook. The application installed on a desktop allows you to sort of maybe load things a little bit faster in the Outlook, but I usually prefer to use it on a web browser. You can install Notepad, Paint, and Photos. I don't uninstall them because I actually find Photos loads pictures better than any other tool that I've used. It's very fast and it has a really nice compatibility. Paint is also very fast, and actually it has been getting a lot of updates recently. So Paint now in the newest versions of Windows works a lot more similar to Photoshop. It's a much more powerful tool than it used to be, so I keep that around. And Notepad I actually don't use very often, but it feels weird to delete it. Power Automate lets you kind of do schedule or like make little automation macros for Windows. It is kind of cool and fun to play with, but I don't use it. Quick Assist lets you give somebody a code to remote access your computer, which could be useful, but I don't usually use it. I do keep the Windows Remote Desktop connection because it is a pretty good piece of software. Snipping tool I love, and I will never get rid of it. I don't even know if you can uninstall it. I wouldn't. Get rid of Solitaire. Get rid of sticky notes. I keep Terminal. We will use Terminal during this class, so you can also get rid of Sound Recorder, but I keep it because it's just a useful tool. I can get rid of Weather because I don't use my laptop to check weather. I go to the web browser, and I don't need web search from Bing. Windows Clock, if you uninstall, it doesn't remove the clock from your system. Your system still has a clock. This is just like the ability to set alarms and things on your computer, which I use my phone for. Never use that. Xbox, both of these can be uninstalled. I'm going to uninstall them here, but if you use your desktop for any kind of gaming, even if it's like Steam and things, these two, you would be surprised at how many things depend on the Xbox services within Windows. So you can uninstall these, but do so with caution if you do any kind of like games or media stuff on your computer. These are surprisingly important for Windows now, but I'm going to uninstall them. So in doing what we just did, we have lowered our list of applications to, what is that, like, oh, that one didn't go through. There we go. To very little, right? So you can uninstall almost everything on Windows 11 now. You can optimize it, and everything will be happy. That's all cool. I'm going to show you my, for anybody who's not used their computer very much, if you left click the start menu, right, you get your normal start menu. You'll see LinkedIn is still installed here for some reason by default. It's because Microsoft owns LinkedIn, but you can just right click there. It doesn't show up in your applications because it is not actually an application. It is a shortcut essentially to a website. So it's not actually installed. But left clicking your start menu brings it up. For anybody who doesn't know, if you start typing, you will immediately begin searching. So the existence of the search bar on the taskbar is pointless, right? If you just touch the start menu and start typing, you can start a search. If you right click your start menu, you get some quick settings and things that are very useful. Right clicking the start bar or the start button is like probably one of the most useful things that they ever implemented. You can do all kinds of management stuff from right here. Like for example, opening settings instantly, easy. Or for example, if you right click, what I was going to do here is open Task Manager, which when it opens in a second, you can go to right here. Oh, for one, if you've never used Task Manager, this is where you can see all of your current running programs. For people who might not know, you can also sort them in different ways. If you're wondering why your computer's running slow, you might open Task Manager and find that 80% of your CPU is being used, and you might be curious, what's using 80% of your CPU? Well, a lot of times it will be a built-in service from Windows. Other times it will be some application that you have installed, and you might consider uninstalling that application. Same with your memory or your disk. You can sort these things by what's using the most or least by clicking these drop downs. The other thing I like to do in here is periodically I go and check my startup applications, which so this lists all the things that happen when you start your computer. I don't use mobile devices attached to Windows, so I turn that off. And I also turn off the Windows security in the tray because I don't usually go down here and check that. You might ask, why does my web browser start at startup? It's because essentially it will preload and cache a lot of the stuff that it needs so that when you hit that Microsoft Edge button, it will open very quickly. Most people use their computer predominantly for browsing the web. So for most people, that makes sense. So it's enabled by default. But if you actually find that you don't often open a web browser when you use your computer, you can turn that off. I keep it enabled because I recognize that most of the time when I use my computer, I'm going to want to open the web browser. So that about wraps up what I do when I configure a Windows computer. I guess there is one more thing here that I wanted to mention. Since Windows, I don't remember whether this was implemented in Windows 10 or 11, but the Microsoft Store is essentially supposed to compete with, it's supposed to have applications on it that are sort of given the stamp of approval by Microsoft to exist, similar to how on Mac computers there is an the Apple Store that has their applications. So what not very many people, even in the IT field, realize is that the Microsoft Store has a different update system from Windows. So when you come over here and check for Windows updates, which it looks like it just did for me on its own, whatever, you will see this load for a little bit, and then you will wait, did I just lose? No, it's still going. I thought I just lost my recording for a moment. This will check for updates, and you will see it pull some amount of updates. Those are like security updates for your computer, operating system, antivirus, yada yada yada. But a surprisingly large number of applications, so as you can see right here, it pulled 3 updates. Surprisingly large number of applications use a different update server, which comes through the Microsoft Store. And they don't automatically pull their updates. So periodically, it's a good choice to go in here to the Microsoft Store and do get updates, which will sit here and load for a moment. And then it will pull, if after it loads for a moment, it'll pull updates for everything that uses this update system, which seems a little bit unnecessary, but there are actually some surprisingly important tools that use this separate update system, like video encoders and terminal and application compatibility tools. So if you don't do this, those applications are going to go out of date over time on your computer, and that can cause all kinds of issues. So it's wise to go in here and pull these updates somewhat regularly. And in a moment here, after this is done loading, you will probably see a very large list of applications that need to be updated. I'm going to let it sit for a moment because I want to see that happen. Come on. It might be, it's probably using all of my internet bandwidth trying to download these other updates. So this is probably stalling out with a low connection speed. Keep in mind when I am making these videos for the rest of the course that I'm using a virtual machine on a laptop. So like I'm using a not very powerful computer that's simulating an even less powerful computer. So these things are there's not very much system resource to work with for these machines. Come on. Well, I guess I could just edit this video to remove this segment in post, but I really didn't want to edit videos. Okay, well, try it on your own computer. I almost guarantee if you go to the Microsoft Store and go into downloads and hit this update button, you'll get a very long list of things that, well, okay, there we go. It only gave me 2 this time, but I usually when you do a fresh Windows install and you hit that update button, you will see 20 to 30 applications that need an update, even on a freshly updated Windows copy. So do it on your own computer, see how many pop up that need updates. You'll probably find that it's a lot. The last little bit on configuring Windows here that I have for advice for people is always, after you do all of these updates and things on a computer, you should always give it a restart. A lot of these, when they install their updates, they expect the computer to restart before any of them start functioning. And if you don't restart after a bunch of updates, it can just break so much stuff on your computer. So always give it a restart after you're done. Oh, there is one more. I apologize. There's always one more thing. So we went through the personalization menu. We went through the security menu, privacy and security. We went through some update menus. The other one here is the system menu. There are a couple things to point out here for people who are power users that are useful. First of all is the power and battery option, which, computer's getting a little bit slow. If you use your computer frequently, as sort of a power user, I usually go for performance mode, which essentially, this just controls sort of how your computer chooses to power on and off devices, like some of the sub devices like wireless antennas, or how hot it will let the CPU run before it starts intentionally slowing it down, or whether or not it keeps your hard drive on or puts it into sleep mode when you don't touch the computer for a few minutes. They're very subtle changes for the most part, but if you are somebody who's using your computer frequently, generally you want to be on the performance mode. Otherwise you will, you can have a pretty big headache. There's also screen timeouts. And on most people's computers, there will be a sleep mode. Screen timing out is not the same as sleep mode. Your screen can turn off and your computer will still be awake. But when it goes into sleep mode, it shuts off a bunch of antennas and things like that, and it makes it, it can sort of impact certain programs' usability and things like that. So depending on what you do, you might want to change your sleep mode or change your screen timeout time. I think I'm just going to leave it as is for me, since I'm going to be using this as a teaching machine. Doesn't really need to be changed. So back on the system settings, we messed with power. Now I'm going to change developer settings. Yay, we're developers now, so we can do these. So you don't need to put your computer on developer mode. This allows you to sort of install applications via the command line and having things run that maybe the computer isn't sure are even executables. I have developer mode on my computer. I don't believe we will need it for the class, but if you are somebody who's going to get into trying to be a power user of your computer, you might want to turn this on. So I'm going to turn it on here, and it will warn you that, you can, this is essentially like setting your computer on unsafe mode. Unsafe mode can make it easier to use the computer, but if you don't know what you're doing, you can do stupid stuff now, which I generally am competent enough to be okay with that. This right here allows you to do end task sort of like you have opened. So if you open the task manager and right click one of these applications, come on. So, if Edge had frozen, I can come over here. If Edge had frozen, I can come over here and end task, and that tells the computer immediately close this program, stop it from running, which is a little bit stronger than pressing the X button when programs freeze. That's what you used to do, but now we have the ability to right click them on the taskbar and end task. So now I can do end task and close window. So if it was frozen, I would come down here and end the task, and it should kill that window regardless of how frozen it is. There are a few things in this File Explorer option that I think are very important and should be turned on everybody's computers, but they are turned off by default. So in your File Explorer, which is this little file here, you will see files. Yeah. If I one of the key things here is showing file extensions. This essentially tells you if you have an image, you can have a image.jpg, an image.gif, an image.png, and these are all different types of files. They mean different things to the computer, but by default, Windows hides that dot whatever, so you don't know what type of file it is. You just know that it's an image of some sort, and the computer knows what it is, and you don't need to. So for people who actually need to refer to files on the computer, like developers, you want to be able to see that file type. So we turn that on. There's also hidden files, so if you're in a menu in your File Explorer, so I'm going to show you new text folder, text document. So we can make that .text. We can make another one. We can make new text document conf files are fairly common. They're configs. Or new, let's make another one. Let's make a text document what's another file type that we see periodically? INIs. So these are 3 different file types. If I didn't have the extensions shown, they would all just look like text documents. But in the end, they're all text documents. So I can go over, even though it's a conf, I can open it with Notepad and type some text and save it. and I can do that in all three of these. If I turn off the show file extensions option, they disappear, with the exception of the conf file, because it doesn't know it doesn't know that's a file extension right now. But you see these two no longer have their file extensions, which is actually a big problem for people who do programming and stuff like that, because you need that information. We will also be using file paths, so a file path is sort of the full the location that your sort of files are stored in, like on your computer itself. So if I go to my PC, this is my hard drive. I go to, say I have something in users, my username, downloads. So this file lives in my hard drive in that folder location, and you want to be able to know how to reference that. So turning that option on in the developer settings gives you the ability to really quickly just go and say, where am I in my storage? This is the path to this folder. So we turn that on. If you have different users on your machine, sometimes you might want to run something as administrator, you might want to run something as some other user. That's what this setting allows you to do. And then showing empty drives gives you the option to see unformatted hard drives that are plugged into your computer, which is sometimes important. You can also turn on remote desktop if you have Windows Pro. And the last one we want to do here is, so by default, if you try to run a script on your computer, it will not allow you to do that. Because they will be unsigned, which is sort of like a stamp of approval from the developer that this is actually a script that you should run. I'm not sure if this will actually end up impacting our Python development, but just in case, I'm going to turn that off. You might say, well, isn't that compromising the security of your machine? Not really, because if somebody had access to your machine to the point where they could run a script, they could also just turn this setting on. So it doesn't really provide anything other than sort of preventing you from accidentally running something that you shouldn't. So it doesn't actually do anything from a security perspective. This is a new setting, so if you're running an older version of Windows, you will not see the option to have sudo. Sudo, this is a reference to in Linux computers, if you wanted to run something as administrator, you would use the sudo command, which essentially tells the computer to run the thing as administrator with the highest privileges. It has been a complaint for decades that Windows did not have that feature. You had to sort of start a new session as an administrator via some graphic user environments to get access to that, or a set of really ugly commands. So they just, in the last major update, essentially added the ability for Windows users to run things with a sudo command. I really like it. I'm going to turn it on. I turn it on all my new computers, and I like to make it so it's inline, just like the classic Linux tool. If you're running an older version of Windows 11, you will not have access to this, but I do. And we will maybe talk at some point about how to upgrade your copies of Windows if you are on an older version. All right, that is everything about Windows configuration that I really thought might be worth getting into. There's obviously a lot more that you can do, but this is sort of everything I do on a fresh install that I try to advise people to do. Once you've changed all these settings to sort of similar to what I did, you can run Windows 11 on practically anything. I've run it on 15, 20-year-old computers, um, and had it run smoothly. I've had it run smoothly on like as low as 2 gigabytes of RAM, um, ancient CPUs and things. If you configure Windows 11 correctly, it is actually extremely well optimized, and rather surprisingly stable. It's my sort of favorite um, Windows release, and I've been around since I got my first exposure to computers in Windows 98. So um, I've seen a lot of different iterations. um, all right, so that's the end of this. The next set of lectures will start to branch off into the sort of more specifics that we need for programming in particular. But you will have to find that in a different video. And obviously, let me know if you think I missed anything, or if something was not clear, or you want to know something else about configuring Windows. Maybe we can have a follow-up if people really want to get into it. There's a lot more that you can do, but this is a happy place to be for most users. So see you in the next lecture, I guess.